All right, I tried to get everything done in one, but because I'm also talking about the SA2 assignment sheet, just wasn't possible. Anyway, jumping off here, I've got a bunch of topics here, and these are just broad themes you could really think about as entry points. And if some of them seem interesting to you, think about, what literary work or works we've read that you see it, having, an important play in. Modernization and industrialization are, of course, really important in the 20th century. Um, Sexism still exists, and the rise of the new woman, which is an early 20th century term that has a lot to do with increasing economic independence, increasing numbers of women in the workforce, the move towards women's suffrage. Um, Also, relational and sexual liberation and freedom, and other issues. And the rise of the new woman and the continued rise of feminism are two themes that really are interwoven. I'm not going to say they're exactly the same thing, um, especially because feminism is a very broad term. We can talk about it in terms of waves. Um, right now, early 20th century, we call it the first wave. We could talk more about that later if you like. Racism and the rise of civil rights, religion and increasing secularization, technological innovation, literary regionalism, the closing of the frontier, Native Americans and relocation, the politics of class, immigration and assimilation, the rise of the metropolis, which we did see a little bit of in Sister Carrie, right, in Chicago. Um, that's a really important theme. Cities really change drastically in the 20th century. And we get a little bit of a glimpse in that tiny bit we've read of Sister Carrie. Um, Interestingly, takes place in Chicago. I just got reminded today because I'm doing this on St. Patrick's Day. I'm wearing green somewhere, I think. Um, that Chicago dyes the the river that runs through their city green for St. Patrick's Day. That just can't be good. It just can't be. They've never even made an assessment on whether or not the dye does anything. It's anyway. We don't have time to talk about that. The Harlem Renaissance too. This is not a complete list. It's not an exhaustive list, but it gives you some ideas to think about where you want to go. For some people, looking at these themes are like, oh, I want to think about this and then apply it. But for other people, they might already have, one or two pieces of lit that are like bugs in their brains and they can't stop thinking about them. Use that as a starting point too. And I've given you like a rough um, uh, flowchart for thesis creation right here, from your topic to question, the rough thesis, to your supports. Um, well, for right now, what you're going to be looking to turn in is going to be like what I would call a rough thesis, um, because you sometimes, as you're looking for your evidence or your support in the text, it's going to change a bit, and that's natural. Remember, writing is not linear. Sometimes it gets represented that way in the movies or on TV or something, but it's quite cyclical. Sometimes you have to swing back in order to go even better and farther forward, and that's totally okay. In fact, that's the way it should be. If you're just writing beginning to end in one draft and then you're turning it in, I don't really know what to say about that other than, it probably isn't going to be the best work you can do. Um, anyway, more about that. I've also given you some structure and content information here. Um, and sometimes I get questions on this. I'll go over right here and now. Going beyond class notes and discussion is possible. If you're just going through what has already been said by me, you're not showing enough of your own independent interpretation and analysis. And that's what's really necessary in an English class. No more than two literary works. We've talked about that. The thesis should be clear and detailed, putting in that pattern of development or essay map as a list at the end is a great way of going about it. Um, Supporting that thesis with clear topic sentences, the TRIAC or TIA method for your body paragraphs, signal phrases to introduce your quotations, we talked about that already. Block quotations, I've talked about that. Quotation marks provide page numbers for your textual evidence, strong conclusion, and whatever action is happening in the story that you're using, you always put in the present tense, even though you read it in the past. So if you're looking at something like, say, let's take an example. Let's say you're talking about Sister Carrie, okay, and Chaz Drouet, you know, you might have something like, the author shows that Chaz Drouet is not somebody to be trusted when Chaz says, and then put the quotation. Anyway, yes, typed final draft, typed rough draft, Success Center or online tutoring slip for that rough draft. First time getting all that taken care of can be a little bit daunting online, but I think we've hammered out all of the kinks. But again, if there are more questions moving forward, I want to know. I want to know. MLA formats. And here are a whole bunch of possible exercises or directions that you could explore to get to a thesis. Now, notice all of these are pretty much, imperative sentences. They're asking you to do something. Trace the representation of gender. Explore the role of ethnicity. Write about the narrator's perceptions. Now, these can lead you to a thesis statement, but they cannot be a thesis statement in their own. So if I wanted to turn number 2 into a thesis statement, I might say something like, Suisenfa and Zora Neale Hurston use the role of ethnicity to completely different, towards 2 completely different representations of minority groups in the United States. That would be a thesis statement. Not the best one. I just freestyled that one. Let me find a better one for you. Okay, compare and contrast the representation of nature in 2 different poems by 2 different authors. Okay. You could start with something so broad as the vision of nature and its relationship to humanity is diametrically different in Robert Frost's Mowing and William Carlos Williams' Spring and All, etc. and so forth. I'm not going to go through all of these. And again, these are just to get you going. I love it when people come up with their own thesis statements because I get really excited when I see people chase down their own ideas and support it with a text. That's exciting stuff for me. That's how I know I'm in the right job. So feel free to go wild. Give me 2 or 3, and if I think it needs to be modified, fine. But you don't lose any points by just throwing something out there. As long as it's on something that we've read, it's no more than 2. Other than that, go for it. And yeah, your own topics, your own thesis statements that are very different from what we've got here. Might as well just put them up there. If I think they need revision or if I think there's something else that needs to change about them, of course I'll let you know. But, I like it when people, take the road less traveled, if you want to go by Robert Frost's poem again. I remember one time in high school we were reading a Robert Frost poem. I can't remember which one it was, but I said it basically was an analogy for World War II. which I found it was very unique and idiosyncratic interpretation because nobody else bought it at all. But whatever, I mean, if you can support it, you can support it. It's like deconstruction. Deconstruction can take the privileged idea and make it the subservient idea. It can switch that hierarchy, and that's exciting and fun stuff to do. Making Danny the real bully in the Karate Kid, or making Joker the real hero in the Batman movie. Interesting, fun stuff. Anyway, I've already talked about the dates. If you want to get them to me sooner, that's totally fine. I know sometimes people just want to keep shooting them at me, and that's great. And 2 or 3 is fine, And if you're going to give me 2 or 3, might as well make them as different as possible. Sometimes people give me 2 or 3, and they're just kind of slightly different wordings of the same thing, of the same thesis, essentially. We can always work on wording together, but if you've got 3 drastically different ideas, I'd rather see that variety. But yeah, shoot them at me as soon as you would like. Anyway, that's it for that. Sorry it took so long this time, but hopefully it was worth it. Once again, if you've got any questions, large or small, make sure that you talk to me about it. A couple things that I want to very quickly highlight for you are regarding the Langston Hughes poems. The Negro Speaks of Rivers, like I said before, is about the racial unconscious. Mother to Son has a structure like a blues song, so think about intertextuality between literature and music. I think is pretty self-explanatory. It's a metaphor. Mulatto has a very interesting structure to it, with italics for different people's thoughts or quotations. Song for a Dark Girl, I think, is pretty straightforward. Genius Child, Freedom. Theme for English 1, I always want to say English 1B. Theme for English B is one that gets anthologized a lot. And I want you to think about, what he is trying to accomplish in that theme. Is that a theme that could really be turned in? Theme is an old school word for essay or written assignment. And I want you to also think about, what his interests are. And I want you to think about the line towards the end where he says to his teacher that the teacher is somewhat more free. I mean, there's something about being in that privileged class of white people. I mean, in general, they're not experiencing racism. They have fewer social barriers. He's making a suggestion that even the person of that dominant group still suffers through a racist system. And we've seen different incarnations of that line of thinking throughout the course too. So keep that in mind and keep a lookout for that. In Barn Burning, I do want you to think about the relationship of Sardi's father to the Civil War in the South, and whether it is really a noble cause. Sardi's father fought as a mercenary on the Confederate side. I'd also like you to think about those internal monologues, tiny little bits that we have in there from that. And think also about that phrase that we see again and again in Barn Burning, the draw of blood, the call of blood. What does it mean to be called or drawn to blood? Blood being, a word for family and family relations. I already talked about the quiz coming up in a couple weeks. When we get closer, we can talk about it more if you like. Until then, that's all I got for you. Thanks a lot for watching, and I hope to talk to you soon.